Thousands are still desperate to get out. Plus, hate crimes from the past. We'll speak to the American filmmaker who's revisiting case files of unsolved murders.
Hello there. Well, we're still looking at some flooding situations for northern parts of Namibia as well as into Angola. Take a look at the satellite image and you see these clouds right here. This is what we're kind of worried about over the next couple of days. Anywhere from 100 to 125 millimeters of rain is going to be falling into that region. You can see all of that heavy rain really staying there. That extends over here towards the east. Now, a little bit of a break for parts of Mozambique, the northern sections of Mozambique, where we did see a lot of flooding there. The flood rains will start to ease just a bit, but don't get your hopes up. We're going to still see more rain coming into their forecast. And then down towards South Africa, a lot of the rain showers that we had seen, those were quite shallow at times, quite light. Johannesburg is going to be 27, still some clouds in the forecast, Durban at 29, and a warm day for Cape Town at 29 degrees as well. For the northern part of Africa, well, we're going to be seeing a lot of rain shower activity all the way from Algiers over towards Tripoli, Benghazi as well. Not only rain shower activity, but we're also going to be seeing some very high winds. Those winds are going to be pushing along the coastal regions from west towards the east. That means we could possibly see some sandstorms as well as dust storms and bring those visibilities down. We are going to be seeing temperatures for Cairo down to about 22 degrees. How about Benghazi at 15? And Algiers also seeing about 15 degrees for them.
Afghanistan is faced with a huge challenge.
Relations have gone really sour between us and our allies.
We have inflicted considerable damage on the enemy.
The people who make international headlines.
Ultimately, the truth will out.
They want to stop this publication of information that embarrasses them.
Make time for Sir David Frost. Frost over the world. At this time on Al Jazeera.
Hello again, a reminder of our top stories. Some of Yemen's most powerful tribes have joined the anti-government movement, adding to the pressure on President Saleh to resign. Libya's former interior minister has told Al Jazeera Tripoli is the only major city that remains under Muammar Gaddafi's control. The Libyan leader made another defiant address on Friday, vowing he will not step down. Meanwhile, the US has imposed sanctions on the Libyan government, and the EU says Gaddafi must be sent back into the cold. On Saturday, the UN's Security Council is expected to firm up its draft resolution calling for sanctions. Now, amid the growing unrest in Libya, foreign governments and companies have been scrambling to pull their citizens and their workers out of the country. Hundreds of people have already been arriving at the nearby ports after being evacuated on ships. But there are growing concerns for the safety of tens of thousands of foreign workers, many of them from poorer countries who don't have the resources to bring them home. Tarek Bazley reports.
Relief and joy, one of a handful of Filipino workers to make it back to Manila. Edwin Bautista was evacuated by his French construction company.
There's so much killing there, even amongst themselves. We could have got attacked.
These are the lucky ones, but estimates suggest another 30,000 Filipinos, 60,000 Bangladeshis and around 23,000 Thai workers remain in Libya. The Chinese government has started its evacuation of some 30,000 nationals, these workers arriving by ship on the Greek island of Crete. Other nations too are pulling out their people. These Romanians, some of those evacuated from Libya on 2 military planes.
I think they are now at the period just before a civil war, 1000%. Benghazi and Tripoli don't understand each other. Benghazi doesn't want Gaddafi anymore. Tripoli wants him. That's why we came back. We don't want to be in a civil war.
And on the island of Malta, the arrival of more evacuees. More than 200, mainly Europeans, arriving from Benghazi on the British naval ship, the HMS Cumberland. A second warship has also been sent to Libya to help with rescue missions.
I had friends who were standing around in the streets, and mercenaries would come around with plateless cars, and I had a group of friends, 3 of them, they got shot down, they got killed.
167 Americans, along with 118 people from other countries, have also arrived in Malta. Strong winds and high seas having delayed their ferry from leaving Tripoli.
First of all, it was only like Protestant, pro-government people just shouting for Gaddafi. Then they had machine guns the next day and shooting everywhere. They were drunk or something. You can hear them shouting any words and shooting on the building walls.
As nations scramble to pull their citizens out of Libya, there are chaotic scenes at Tripoli airport. Thousands of people, many without the support of their governments or companies, have set up camp at the terminal. As the situation in the country becomes more desperate, so too are those wanting to escape abroad. Tarek Basley, Al Jazeera.
In Ireland, the counting has begun after the general election, and the opinion polls have already suggested that the main ruling party, Fianna Fáil, is heading for its worst ever defeat. After 14 years in power, many voters seem to blame the party for mishandling the country's economic crisis. Fianna Fáil has led the government throughout the boom years, but also into the bust, which ended with a joint EU-IMF bailout. The opposition, Fine Gael, has said it will try to renegotiate the terms of Ireland's debt. Let's go live to Dublin. Rory Challens is there monitoring the count for us. Rory, what's the latest?
Well, the count's been going on here in central Dublin for about 3 hours now. You can probably see it just over my shoulder, going on all the way down in the hall there. The first exit poll came out at 8 o'clock GMT this morning, and that seemed to confirm really what people had been suspecting in the run-up to this election, that this was going to be absolutely disastrous for the incumbent party, Fianna Fáil. They are looking like they're going to get about 15.1% of the vote, which is an absolute devastating outcome for them. It's looking pretty good for Fine Gael, their arch rivals, about 36.1% of the vote predicted for them. That's not quite enough to go for an outright majority, so some sort of coalition likely either with independents or with Labour, who incidentally are looking like they've got a very good result as well. Now, I'm joined by the Irish journalist Lise Hand from the Irish Independent. When all the dust settles here, what sort of reshaping of the political landscape are we going to be looking at?
We're going to be looking at an extraordinary reshaping of the landscape, because Fianna Fáil have been a dominant party of power really since the foundation of the state, and they are now facing annihilation, to be absolutely honest with you. And this really is a direct result of their policies over the last 4 or 5 years, particularly maybe the last 2.5 years, and how they dealt with the banking crisis, with the economy. And really the electorate are now wreaking revenge on what they see as a series of really, really, really disastrous decisions, maybe lack of action, roads taken that maybe shouldn't have been taken. I think there's a lot of commentary around the time of, say, the IMF bailout, that it was surprise maybe expressed that there was not more civil unrest in Ireland. A lot of people looked abroad and they said, well, look at Iceland, other countries where they had. But I think what you're sort of seeing is the Irish way of doing things, which they waited until the ballot box really to make their protest. And I think what we're seeing here today is an utter redrawing of that electoral map. You will have, as you pointed out, their electoral rivals, Fine Gael, who have not really been elected at the ballot into power for 28 years, will now be, by a long shot, the major power in government. So it's an extraordinary change.
Now, what sort of warning do you think this gives to other governments maybe around Europe who might be in similar sort of situations and might be thinking about taking some sort of financial assistance from the EU and the IMF? Do you think this is a warning for them not to?
Well, I think it must be sending chills down the spines of various ruling parties around Europe, absolutely, because the effect of the IMF coming into Ireland was devastating really for the psyche of the Irish people. People felt really badly about it and very, very, very badly let down by the government. Really, I think they're being punished not so much for bringing in the IMF bailout, which people I think really accepted was completely necessary, but the actions that were taken that actually brought them in the first place. So I think any other governments really need to look long and hard at taking those decisions to bring in, rather than maybe trying to figure out an alternative path, or else maybe calling an early election, which maybe they should have done and had an election maybe before this decision had to be taken. But I think what's happening in Ireland will be scrutinised by other governments at the moment, very much so.
And a poison chalice, really, for the government that's coming in. If it is a Fine Gael Labour coalition, what sort of challenges are they going to have ahead of them?
Oh, they're going to have enormous challenges. I mean, they're facing, the situation here is obviously still extremely, it's probably extremely delicate, really. I think Fine Gael have played a fairly clever game during this election campaign, as they have promised nothing, which of course, as you know, for politicians in election campaign time is incredibly unusual. It might be a first that there wasn't the usual bag full of goodies being promised and given away. So I think there probably will be an extended honeymoon period when people realise that there is a lot of pain coming still, a lot of hard medicine to be taken. But I think the electorate are in a very unforgiving mood, and unless Fine Gael basically start implementing the policies on which they were elected, I think the honeymoon period will be very, very short. But they do have a task ahead of them.
Lisa, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much for joining me there. So the counting goes on here. The first kind of indications of seat wins and that sort of thing, probably going to be about another hour or two. It's not going to be until Sunday morning before we really know who has actually won in this election.
All right, Rory Challens live in Dublin. Thanks, Rory. Now, a court in Pakistan has jailed another American national, this time for overstaying his visa. The arrest of Aaron DeHaven in Peshawar comes amid tension between the US and Pakistan over the detention of another American CIA contractor, Raymond Davis. Davis could face trial over the killing of two Pakistanis in what he says was an act of self-defense after they tried to rob him in January. The US says Davis has diplomatic immunity. Iran and Syria have agreed to cooperate on naval training. That's according to a report in Iran's state media. This comes after two Iranian warships docked in Syria on Thursday, after Egypt gave them permission to pass through the Suez Canal. These were the first Iranian Navy vessels to pass through the canal since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. In New Zealand, 145 people are confirmed dead now, and more than 200 are still missing after Tuesday's earthquake. Andrew Thomas has the latest.
What the earthquake didn't pull down, machines now razed to the ground. This was Brent Smith's bed and breakfast.
There's the saying, you don't know whether to laugh or cry. I mean, I haven't stopped shaking since they started, and it's just history, you know, it's history gone.
The house was 155 years old. It was gone in an hour and a half. This is just one of many hundreds of buildings that will have to be demolished over the next weeks and months. In the city centre, 1 in 3 buildings assessed so far has been found to be structurally unsound. The precariousness of so many buildings makes the work of the rescue and body recovery teams